Hi, everybody. Happy Thursday. Thank you so much for joining me. And it's not just Thursday, it's Halloween. So happy Halloween. I hope you all have a spooky but fun and safe night tonight. I have a great guest with us today that I'm excited to introduce you to. We have Marc Schneider. So with CIRAS,
Welcome, everyone.
So we're going to start off by having you share a bit about your background and how you became an industrial specialist and a project manager with CIRAS in the MEP program, and what inspired you to enter this field.
All right. Well, I'm from Iowa, so I grew up in Iowa. Went to Iowa State University. Originally started off in engineering, but decided to make a switch to business, and I chose the transportation logistics major because it seemed more exciting than the rest. I like transport equipment and trucks and trains and ships and all that stuff. Didn't want to be an accountant, which I thought was pretty boring. Didn't want to be in sales, which I kind of envisioned as uh, calling on people, trying to sell them stuff. Didn't want to be finance. I envisioned that like Wall Street or marketing. So ended up with transportation logistics, graduated, got hired by Hewlett Packard, moved me out to California, Silicon Valley, which is quite a lot different than Iowa. Worked out there. I kind of started in the trenches in logistics, kind of working on the inbound logistics, warehouse receiving side, then moved into analytics, kind of working across HP on doing analysis. Where should the distribution centers be, introducing new products? How should we get those like from Asia to the US distribution centers and whatnot? Shifted companies, went to work for Emery Worldwide. They were setting up their international third-party logistics arm. So they're Emery Air Freight, Emery Worldwide. So I was on the ground floor with that. And then through them got moved again, systems and analysis, then moved to Australia with them, kind of did logistics operations, running the warehouse and distribution. Took on broader responsibilities to include South Asia and then Southeast Asia, and then moved to Singapore, did solutions, which was similar to what I was doing in the US, but designing solutions for clients, costing them out, then helping to do the project management to implement them before handing it off to operations. And my last bit in Asia, I was there for 12 years. I was on the M&A team. So we went and bought a couple companies in Asia, one in Singapore, one in China. So traveled across China, Southeast Asia, looking at companies, kind of doing due diligence on them, and then helping to implement or integrate those companies into our company when we did buy the two that we selected. Decided I was having too much fun with that. I was actually traveling a lot and whatnot, so I decided to move back to Iowa. And I call my full-time job is farming. Took over the family farm and expanded it. And then I was working with IBM for a couple of years doing finance, project management. And then Iowa State had the job opening here with CIRAS, Center for Industrial Research and Service. So I joined them. So on a part-time basis with them. But I like it because I can kind of keep one foot in my old career, working with clients, setting up new projects, doing analysis, costing, helping find solutions for them. So that's kind of how I fell into the CIRAS job here as a technically industrial specialist project manager, but we're the ones who go deliver the projects out to customers.
Perfect. So I want to ask Marc, listen, technical issues come up. Do you hear an echo by chance? Like, is it being
Nope,
repeated on your end?
nope.
Okay. Okay. Hopefully it's just on my end then. So we're just gonna keep rolling through it. So thank you so much for sharing with me and your background and being a farmer. That's amazing. So I wanted to roll into the ExporTech program and the incredible opportunity manufacturers looking to expand internationally. Are you able to explain what the ExporTech program is, how it works, and why it's such a valuable program for businesses looking to grow globally?
Sure. Um, ExporTech is kind of a joint program that was developed between the U.S. Commercial Service and the National MEP Center. So CIRAS, like Alaska MEP, there were the state centers. So The Export Tech program, essentially, as I describe it, is a program to help companies significantly increase their level of exports. So it could be a company that's not exporting today who wants to start exporting. It could be a company that's an experienced exporter and they're looking to develop a new market or enter a new market, something like that. But most of our clients are kind of in the middle. So our sweet spot are what I call accidental exporters. So they're small and medium sized manufacturers and companies that are exporting a little bit kind of by accident. So they didn't really have a plan or a purpose. They just got an inquiry from a trade show they attended. They got an email or someone contacted them and say, hey, I like your product, but I'm in Germany or Australia or wherever. Can you ship it to me? And most companies, right, will never turn down business. So they like, okay, let's figure out a way to do it. So they start doing it and they get some more business and they get to the point where they say, hey, maybe we should make this a core part of our business. Maybe it won't be half of our revenue, but it will be a significant piece of our revenue. Or they realize, hey, we need to figure out, this is real. We need to figure out how to do that. So Export Tech program kind of helps them take that next step, kind of figure out where they need to be, where they're at, how they can get there, and those types of things.
I love that. No, it is such an exciting program. And can you tell me how long you've been assisting with this program and running the program with the MEP?
Yep. Well, it's started off as kind of a national MEP push. And now we do have a national MEP working group that I'm part of, but it's really up to each state's MEP center to manage and deliver the program. So not every single state is doing it. I think there's 37 states out of the 50 or 51, if you count Puerto Rico, that are doing it. So I talked with you guys at Alaska to helping you guys get it off the ground as well. But I've been involved with it for 7 years. I think our first export, maybe even longer, our first Export Tech cohort was around 2014, if I remember right. We in Iowa, we try to do it annually. Some states do it more often. Some are a little bit more ad hoc. During COVID, we kind of had a hiatus. A lot of companies weren't as interested in exporting during COVID. There's just a lot of other stuff going on. Then after COVID, the national working group, we kind of worked together to come up with a hybrid model of Export Tech. Originally, Export Tech was 3 full-day sessions, 1 day each month, so over 3 months. And then we work with the companies to develop an export plan. So that's kind of the end result of Export Tech is a business plan that helps the company increase their level of exports. So we converted the program to be hybrid, where part of it could be in person, part of it would be virtual. And in Iowa, the model we use is we have 10 weekly sessions. So instead of a full day session, each session is a couple hours, 90 minutes to 2 hours. But the first session is virtual, kind of an introduction kickoff. Then our second session is in person because we still see value in bringing everybody together, having them meet the program participants, which include obviously the U.S. Commercial Service from the federal side. We bring in the state economic developers. So in Iowa, it's the Iowa Economic Development Authority, because usually each state has a function in their side that helps promote exports, trade missions, those types of things. And then CIRAS, the MEP Center. And then the other participants in the cohort, we have outside private expert subject matter experts come in. So could it be international lawyers, international finance people, logistics people, all those types of folks. So the second session is in person, so we can kind of meet everybody face to face. Then we have 7 more sessions virtually every once a week. And then the final session will be in person again. So where all the companies come together, present their export plan to our review panel. I kind of call it like the Shark Tank process. But they're not there to buy it per se, but to provide their feedback. Where did they miss anything? And how, especially we focus then on how can they implement their business plan? Because we don't want the companies to develop just a business plan that they file away, but we want them to have a business plan that they can actually go out and execute and start seeing results.
No, absolutely. I think that is so important, so that they're getting just so much more than just a plan, but they're actually starting the implementation. So I think that is huge. Can you tell me a little bit more about the time commitment? I think you were touching on a little bit, but like from start to finish, how long is the program?
Each state can structure it differently. Here in Iowa, again, it's a 10-week process. So each week we have a couple hours we spend together. We assign a coach to each company, so that coach will be with them throughout the whole process. And the coach will typically schedule a session with them in between the formal sessions. So they'll have another session each week with their coach, whether it's an in-person session, an hour conference call, whatever it might be. Just kind of review things. The coach is there to help answer the questions, point them in the right direction, connect them with resources. So if they have a question, like, I have a question on how I can protect my intellectual property. It's like, okay, well, here's a place you can go to get more information, or a person you can talk to about that and whatnot. So from the company side, it's a couple hours to attend the session, and then maybe a couple more hours of their time internally to cover, don't really want to call it homework, but or assignments, right. But we have tasks for the companies to work on. So it's not like they get to the 9th week and say, oh crap, we have to spend all this time to come up with this business plan. Each week over the 10 weeks, they're spending a little bit of time doing pieces of the plan. So by the time they get to the end of the program, it's like, oh, hey, I have a total plan here ready to go. So, anywhere from, 3 to 5 hours a week, time commitment from the company side. And we also have it's not just one person from the company. So we want a team of people from the company. So it can be, a couple people up to 5 or 6. And, they can interchange in and out. So if the week we're talking about international finance issues, they can have their finance or accounting team there. The time we're talking about shipping logistics issues, they can have their international shipping team there. As long as we have a few consistent people throughout the whole process.
No, absolutely. Okay, so about 3 to 5 hours, and sounds like your program, you guys spread it out between 10 weeks. So not too bad. And something I'm going to throw you off a little bit, but are you able, since you've been involved in this program for, I think you said 6 or 7 years, can you share a success story or two that have businesses that you've worked with that have had great success going through this program?
Sure. I would say almost all of our people going through the program are successful one way or the other. In some limited cases, a company might go through their program and realize, hey, I'm not really ready to export yet or export today, but I know when I am ready a year from now or 2 years from now, I can take the plan and start working on that. But most of the time, it's once you're ready to export, it's not an immediate success. It takes 1 to 2 to 3 years before you see, just like developing any new market, right? You're likely not going to be profitable in the first 6 months, but we've done some studies or analysis. On average, I forget the exact number, but on average, the impact the company reports within the first 12 months of going through a program is, around $250,000 of impact. We've had companies that have had less. We've had companies that have had millions of dollars of new sales as a result of the program. One notable company that I remember well is a liquid manure application company. So again, Iowa being very ag based, right. We have a lot of ag-based companies, but they went through the program and we're focused on exporting to Eastern Europe because that's where they have a lot of, we help them define their market there. There's a lot of large livestock manufacturers or livestock producers there. Byproduct of livestock production is manure, so they have to have a way to do that. So part of their export solution was educating their customers of the benefits of injecting manure in the ground versus just throwing it away or dumping in a ditch or spreading it on top. But they were very successful. They have now a very large subsidiary in Croatia that they use to support Eastern Europe. So they were able to grow significantly that way.
Wow, that is incredible. And you're saying like on average it's about like 250,000, and then some have been a lot more and some has been some less, but all has gained like such a great impact by going through this and exporting because you're reaching all those markets that you didn't have before.
Correct. Yep.
No, that's amazing. Thank you so much.
Our companies have ranged again from the liquid manure application to a fundraising company that like makes poultry silverware. Kit, which is a little bit different. Companies that refurbish grain dryers, companies that make a high-end racing bike, mountain bike. So they make cases that will fold that you can easily fit into airline baggage holds and whatnot. So it's a wide range of products. We've had electronic companies, companies that make traditional metal parts, things like that. The other thing, when we look for companies, we always remind everyone that, hey, Canada and Mexico count as export markets also. So, and the big benefit, Alaska is a little bit different, I know, but like for Iowa, the big benefit of Canada and Mexico is you can drive a truck there. So it's kind of very similar to a domestic distribution type scenario, but it's still an international market. You still qualify for some of the state and federal grants and programs to try to help exporters. And that's another part of the ExporTech program, is we help connect companies to some of those funding opportunities, to some of those trade missions or trade show funding opportunities that are there to help them get exporting off the ground.
No, absolutely. And I'm super glad that you brought that up, and like the array of businesses that you work with, because I was going to ask, like, when you like, who are like the ideal clients to be approaching? Because I know in Alaska, it just feels like a lot of them are like smaller, or they're doing just like really like niche items, but it sounds like you've worked with an array of companies. So this is definitely like, once you're ready to take that step and grow, it can be a fit for you as long as you have the time and the capacity to do so, it sounds like.
Yep. I mean, this last cohort we usually run our cohorts the first quarter of every year.
Okay.
But we had a company that makes plastic racing track, now that you race like Matchbox cars on.
Oh, cool.
So they have a version which is just a toy, but they also have a STEM educational version that they sell to schools. So we're helping them find their export markets for that. In their case, they were focusing on like the US English-based export markets, the UK and Australia and whatnot. We have a company that made flow meters for testing bypass on engines. And they were recently featured in some social media from like Dave's Auto, big social media site about repairing cars and whatnot. A company that makes kind of high-end woodworking equipment that they sell obviously to people who are DIY and craftsmen and whatnot. So it kind of can be a wide range of products. It doesn't have to be like a Boeing or IBM or John Deere making large industrial equipment.
Okay. No, thank you so much for sharing that. I think that that's something that that our clients really resonate with, that it doesn't have to be these big operations. Like, it can be a good fit for you. And so kind of slides well into the next question I had, is for manufacturers that might feel intimidated by exporting, what common challenges do you see, and how does ExporTech help participants overcome these obstacles to successfully enter international markets?
Yep. Some of the things I wrote down here and that we see as kind of common themes is a lot of companies have questions or struggle about which market. So some of the markets they have accidentally started exporting to, they kind of wonder, well, is that a good market for me or not, or is there a better market? So that's one question we have. Another big one is, or challenges they face, is that they know, I don't want to say exporting is complicated. I mean, on one hand it is, but just like starting any new business, new market, there's lots of different things. But their big concern is, we don't know what we don't know. And,
Right.
that they know there's a lot to know, but they don't really kind of know what all that is. And then a third one there is they just don't know where to turn to for help to kind of address some of these questions. So the way ExporTech tries to address some of those is, as I mentioned, we assign the coach to help them do that. We have a piece that kind of goes through the value proposition and market selection to kind of help them identify, first, why would somebody from overseas want to buy your product, right? Because typically you might need to charge more than a local competitor because you got to get your product there to start with. So what's your value proposition? Why should someone from overseas buy your product? And we go through the typical things, right? So some companies might say, well, we have a good reputation. It's like, well, no one knows your reputation overseas.
Right.
Or they might say, well, we have a quality product. It's like, well, everybody has a quality product. No one's advertising my product is crap, but you should buy it, right? To go through that, we have with ExporTech what we call the Export Village. So there's kind of a network of resources in every state and across the country that kind of help companies export. So the U.S. Commercial Service, as I mentioned, is one great one. The state economic development authorities. The U.S. Commercial Service has what they call the DEC, District Export Council, which exists, I think, in almost all the states. But each state has their own DEC, which are private companies, manufacturers, and whatnot who want to help other companies export. So they're there to kind of be peers and answer questions, provide support, whatnot. And then the different networking resources, right? So the international finance, international legal issues, international logistics, all those types of things. So we have this export village that we've not created, but identified and kind of built up that we can plug companies into that help answer their questions, right? So where do we turn to? Well, here's some great resources. And then it's just the fact of helping them come up with that business growth plan. We go through a gaps and obstacles exercise with them through the program. So help them identify, I think there's 13 topic areas, if I remember right. So they kind of do a self-evaluation of where they're at with those 13 areas to be successful in exporting. So I kind of identify what gaps they have. And then each export tech program is not standardized, so to speak, right? So we use that to drive the content for the remaining program. So if everybody thinks they have their international finance side under control, we won't talk about that. We'll focus on other areas. But if people think they have intellectual property issues they want to protect, or questions they have, or they don't know how export regulations work, or they don't know how they can make sure they get paid internationally, so we can bring in the experts to talk to them about that. So we use that to bring in the right people, the right resources to help them identify those and close those gaps and make that part of their export plan. So when they come to the end, they've gone through the process of identifying their gaps, identifying who they need to talk to, how they can close those gaps. So if they execute their plan, they should be successful in growing their level of exports.
So it sounds like this program that you guys have in Iowa and that the other MEPs can take part in, like you can really mold this to the businesses that you get that are interested. And it also sounds like this program is really open and available to like anyone that even wants to export now or in the future, because it really runs them through like from the beginning, like how you're going to and the steps and why you should and where you should go. So it's not really as intimidating as it might seem. It sounds like if you want to grow and you're interested in that, maybe look into like joining this program, because this is going to give them all the knowledge and then end up with like a plan they can implement, whether that's right now or in a year, like you said. Then they're going to be so much more knowledgeable to tackle that. Is that correct?
More or less correct, yeah.
Okay.
We tend to work with companies. You want the company that are joining ExportTech to basically decided, yes, we want to export. Now we want to figure out how to do it. So if a company's not sure if they want to export or not, obviously we can still help them work through some of those questions. We can do some market research studies with them. Sometimes we call it like ExportTech Light to kind of step through the process so they can kind of see where they're at. But once they get to ExportTech program, it's like, okay, we've pretty much decided we want to export. Maybe it's not today, maybe it's in the future. But you want, they go through the program to help them focus that direction, figure out what they need to do, figure out kind of the timing, right? Is the timing right now, or is it later? What is their financial expectations to be, where's their break-even point, those types of things.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for clearing that up, because I'm hopeful that, people that are watching this that are interested in exporting, you guys can reach out to your local MEP. Marc has been wonderful at answering all these questions, and he's way knowledgeable. He's been doing this for years now to really, get this program kickstarted in Alaska to help the manufacturers grow and to export internationally. And there are state grants available once you start doing that. So I really appreciate you answering all those questions. And now to kind of move a little bit past ExportTech, a little bit into supply chain mapping, because I know that's another critical area you focus on. Can you explain supply chain mapping, what it is and how it helps manufacturers improve their efficiency?
Sure. Supply chain mappings, I guess, have always been around, but it really got a lot of interest after COVID. So with all the supply chain bottlenecks and issues and whatnot, companies were kind of like, hey, I realize I need to better understand my supply chain. A lot of times companies don't really think about where their suppliers are, or even who their suppliers are, much less who their suppliers are. So with supply chain mapping, we can help them map that out. So basically what we do with supply chain mapping is help them identify, each company could have multiple supply chains. So we typically start with a specific supply chain, whether it's inbound for this product line or maybe outbound for another one. But who are the suppliers in their like on an inbound supply chain? Help them map, identify who their suppliers are, what their volumes are with each supplier. We go through and do a segmentation exercise. So we normally work with 4 categories. They can be customized, but we have what we call Critical suppliers, so those are ones that supply something very unique to that company. They just can't tomorrow go out and find another supplier to do that, or they supply a part that's very important or critical for the manufacturing process. If we don't have this, then there's nothing much else we can do. We have strategic suppliers, so those are ones that might have strategic supply issues like semiconductors, where everybody was having problems, or something like that. The bottom end, we have what I call common suppliers. So that's like nuts and bolts and hoses and things that you can easily go to a Fastenal or Granger or somebody like that and just, easily get it from somewhere. And then everybody else in between is standard suppliers. So we go through, identify suppliers or locations, what type of supplier there are, their volumes. We'll visually map it, and then we'll work with the company and contacting those suppliers directly. We'll try to use also any other public sources or other information we have to identify who the tier 2 and tier 3, if we can, suppliers are. So who's supplying those suppliers, where they're located. A lot of times we find companies will think, well, all my suppliers are domestic, so I don't really have to worry about international issues. But when you take it to the next level, almost every single time, those suppliers will have suppliers that are located overseas. So maybe your first suppliers in Alaska, but they could be getting electronic components from Taiwan. So you need to be focused on what's happening in Taiwan. We then go through and kind of do identify risks and opportunities, bottlenecks, constraints in their supply chain. So, if all your suppliers are shipping through the port of LA, maybe that may or may not be a good thing, but it's definitely something you want to keep your eye on, because if there's a port strike, if there aren't hurricanes in LA, but if weather issues or whatever it might be, and during COVID time, there were some big COVID outbreaks in LA that did shut the port down. Or we had one company that had a supplier in Sweden that was shipping large steel components going through the St. Lawrence Seaway. So during winter, they had to build up inventory before winter because that wasn't a reliable supply chain. Suppliers that are on the Gulf coast of the U.S., right? So, they're obviously impacted by hurricane season and those types of things. So we help them identify where their suppliers are. We can overlay like natural disaster maps to that to say, are there historically areas that are more prone to issues than others? Is there a concentration of suppliers going through a certain port or gateway? Are there opportunities like you have a lot in Iowa? We might have companies that have a lot of suppliers in the Chicago or Minneapolis area. So there's opportunities to run like a multi-stop truckload to pick up versus them shipping individually. So we help them. We take that information, and people tend to be very visual. It's a lot easier for them to understand their supply chain if it's a map they can look at and charts versus just trying to remember where everything is. So through supply chain mapping, we provide them that. We provide them with the opportunity to identify risks, opportunities. It also serves as kind of a supply chain data repository, because a lot of times companies don't have all this information in one spot. So by having a supply chain mapping process, we pull all this information into one spot. And then oftentimes I will feed into a supply chain risk management review. So again, driven from COVID, people don't stop on this, but hey, what if this critical supplier can't supply to me anymore? What's our backup plan? Who's our riskiest suppliers? Let's put in a risk mitigation plan. Do we transfer the risk, avoid it, assume it, transfer it, those types of things. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what supply chain mapping is. And we've seen significant impacts from customers on that, because obviously a lot of this stuff touches revenue. So being able to protect their revenue or even develop a more robust, reliable supply chain that will help them grow their revenue.
Absolutely. I think that COVID obviously opened up a lot of eyes. And so it really brought up, like, how can we be more prepared for if something like that happens? And then it kind of sounds, but maybe I'm wrong, so because I'm curious, a little bit of hand in hand with supply chain mapping and then exporting and ExporTech. So in the ExporTech program, do you guys go over supply chain mapping or like little pieces of it while going through the ExporTech program, or are they like related at all?
They can be. I mean, a lot of times supply chain mapping is looking at the inbound flows, and ExporTech is looking at the outbound flows. But at ExporTech, we do talk about supply chain risk, market selection, right? So if you're exporting to Africa, what are the risks there? How would you actually transport it? What would the supply chain look like? So there is some overlap, but not directly.
Okay. Nope, that makes sense. And so as we're kind of winding down from this informative session, I wanted to ask, with your background and business and grow and processes, what's the best piece of advice that you could share with manufacturers to scale their operations and explore new opportunities?
I think the biggest piece of advice I would have, and it's a common feedback we get from a lot of companies, is that they're just always fighting fires, don't have time to work on these things. So my biggest piece of advice would be just to find time to start looking at some of these things and driving improvements. So it doesn't have to be a big bang all at once type of thing, but just, an hour a week, have some time with your team to start driving some of these improvements, whatever you can spare. And then just make it a continuous process, right? Continuous improvement process. Just continue the work. So just like with ExporTech, we don't expect you to become the world's largest exporter tomorrow or even in 3 years, but let's start with 1 or 2 markets, right? Let's not, I had a boss that used to say, let's not boil the ocean. Just start small.
I like that.
Start with those 1 or 2 markets, focus on those, don't get distracted by everything else, make those successful, then move on and just continue working at it bit by bit. So that would be my piece of advice, to find the time to make some of these improvements, and then just start small and go as fast as you can, whether it's, as long as it's a steady pace. So whether it's slow, that's fine, but just keep making progress.
I love that. Let's not boil the ocean. No, I love that. I think that our manufacturers, I mean, they wear so many hats, and it feels like time constraint is one of like their biggest challenges. But in order to grow and optimize, you have to start making that time. And it doesn't have to be a huge chunk. Like you said, it can be like an hour a week. Just start taking the time and really start chipping it away. So I think that is wonderful advice for manufacturers. And I really appreciate you coming on and talking about ExporTech and learning more about what you do in Iowa. And thank you so much for being here this Thursday. I appreciate it.
No problem. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, and thank you all for joining. This will be recorded and on our website, so you guys can go back and review it. We do these every other Thursday, so I'll see you in a few weeks. Have a great rest of your day.